What if the thing that's actually holding you back from joy isn't your pain, your trauma, or even your failures, but your strange, secret comfort with suffering itself? It sounds counterintuitive, maybe even ridiculous at first, but think deeper. Recall those rare pockets of peace when life feels light, when love pours in without resistance, when your work flows, when your body no longer feels like a clenched fist, and right when you're about to trust that this ease might be real, something inside you slams the brakes. You blurt out something impulsive. You sabotage a tender moment. You make a rash choice, and without warning, you're spiraling back into chaos. We blame fate, timing, other people. But what if the saboteur has always lived within you? Gay Hendricks calls it the upper limit problem, a subconscious thermostat that regulates how much joy, success, love, and peace we allow ourselves to feel. Once life surpasses that threshold, the unconscious doesn't panic with drama. It responds with logic, guilt, subtle doubt. It whispers, "You're asking for too much. This won't last." Because deep down, your nervous system wasn't built for joy. It was trained to survive. And to your wiring, survival means staying in the familiar, even if the familiar is chaos. Joy? That's unfamiliar. Joy feels dangerous. This isn't about personal weakness. This is about early wiring, how your brain learned that success might bring punishment, that love might vanish, that peace might be followed by loss. So when life feels too easy, the system assumes something must be wrong. And so we protect ourselves, not with conscious sabotage, but with internal auto-responses, familiar discomforts wrapped in new disguises, responsibility, realism, even humility. It doesn't feel like fear, but it is. Because stepping beyond the identity built around struggle means asking, who am I if I'm not suffering? Who am I if I don't hustle, prove, or fix? The scary truth is, rising too far, flying too high, feels just as unsafe as falling. So we unconsciously find ways to bring ourselves back down to the level where pain is predictable and joy feels suspicious. That's why people can reach success, peace, or love, and then sabotage it. Not because they're reckless, but because peace is unfamiliar. Because thriving feels like exposure. Because deep inside, a part of them still equates happiness with danger. This is the hidden ceiling, not glass, but memory. It doesn't reveal itself when you're broken. It reveals itself when you're finally rising, when the noise fades, when love flows, when the air feels clean. That's when it whispers, "Be careful, this won't last." And unless we face this ceiling, name it, and rewire our relationship with peace, we'll always find ways, quiet, clever ways, to crash back down. So the question is no longer, why can't I stay happy? The real question is, what part of me still believes I'm not allowed to be? So, how do we cross that hidden threshold, the one where our subconscious quietly insists, this is too much joy, tone it down? We begin by noticing it. The next time things are flowing, when a relationship deepens, when your work is thriving, when your heart feels inexplicably light, pause and listen. What thoughts begin to rise? Are you suddenly doubting your own worth, anticipating a downfall that hasn't arrived, minimizing your success out of guilt? That's the thermostat kicking in. It rarely sounds like panic. It's quieter than that, more logical. Maybe I should tone it down. Maybe I don't deserve this yet. Something's going to go wrong soon. These aren't premonitions, they're rehearsals, scripts you learn to perform to stay safe. Because for many of us, joy wasn't just rare, it came with a cost. Maybe love was conditional. Maybe peace always preceded chaos. Maybe praise was followed by pressure. So now, even as adults, we flinch when things go too well, because we're still waiting for the backlash. Like Pavlov's dog, we've been trained to associate joy with danger. But what if we could untrain that response? The journey begins by recognizing that nothing is wrong with you. You're not broken, you're adapted. You developed responses that made sense in an environment where love was unstable, or success triggered jealousy, or peace didn't last. Your nervous system learned it's safer not to expect too much. That wiring doesn't disappear just because your life improved. In fact, it often grows louder because unfamiliarity feels unsafe, even if it's good. But now, you can update the script. When you feel joy, let it linger. When you feel peace, breathe it in deeper. When love shows up, receive it without flinching. This isn't about forcing positivity. It's about expanding your emotional capacity, learning to hold joy without fear. It might feel uncomfortable at first. That's okay. Your nervous system needs to be reintroduced to safety. Let your body learn that nothing bad happens when you're happy. Let your mind see that thriving isn't a setup. It's your birthright. And this is where something profound happens. As you expand your capacity for good, you also become less reactive to chaos. You no longer need pain to feel alive. You no longer chase struggle to feel worthy. You stop making room for self-sabotage because you've realized that discomfort isn't a badge of honor. It's just familiar noise. And silence becomes sacred. This is the subtle shift that changes everything. The world outside may remain the same. The challenges, the people, the unknowns, they'll still be there. But your relationship to them changes. You're no longer driven by fear of joy. You're guided by trust in your own capacity to feel good and to stay there. Because here's the truth. You don't have to earn ease. You don't have to apologize for happiness. You don't have to shrink your light so others won't feel uncomfortable. You are allowed to enjoy what you've built. You are allowed to rise without waiting for the fall. You are allowed to be at peace, even if others are still fighting their storms. And maybe, just maybe, by expanding your own limit for joy, you'll show others what's possible too. Not by preaching, but by living, quietly, confidently, openly. That's how we shift the world, not through struggle, but through softness sustained. Let's go deeper. Once you begin to see your upper limit problem, once you recognize the subtle ways your mind brings you back to familiar struggle, the real work begins, expanding your internal ceiling.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your feedback means a lot, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
And here's where the paradox kicks in, because the very part of you trying to grow, evolve, and expand is the same part that has been trained to fear growth. You say you want abundance, love, calm, but the moment those things approach, your inner alarm starts ringing, not loudly, but quietly, with excuses, with hesitation, with distractions, and without realizing it, you begin to dim your shine again, not because you don't want joy, but because joy is uncharted territory, and your body still believes the unknown equals danger. This internal contradiction between what we consciously crave and what we subconsciously avoid is the battlefield of transformation. Think of it like this. You're standing at the edge of a cliff, looking out over a vast and peaceful valley, everything you've ever dreamed of. But behind you is a rickety rope bridge, old and frayed, leading back to a stormy mountain you've already climbed. You hated that mountain. It exhausted you, but it's familiar. And the peace ahead, that valley, it feels exposed, vulnerable, open. So you hesitate. That hesitation is not weakness, it's protection. It's your nervous system doing what it's always done, trying to keep you alive. But surviving is not the same as thriving. In moments like these, we need to get radically honest with ourselves. Ask, what do I believe will happen if I truly feel good for too long? Do you fear jealousy, abandonment, the shoe dropping? Do you believe success will isolate you, or that love will eventually disappear? These fears aren't irrational, they're inherited. They're the echoes of early experiences where joy was punished or followed by pain. Maybe you celebrated as a child and were told to stop showing off. Maybe you felt deeply loved and then were left behind. Maybe you excelled in something only to be rejected by peers. These moments teach the body. It's safer not to shine. But here's the truth. Safety and smallness are not the same. You can feel safe and expansive. You can be grounded and radiant. The process of healing this inner conflict is not about bulldozing through resistance. It's about creating internal safety, so your system no longer mistakes happiness for danger. How? By building what psychologists call emotional capacity, the ability to hold positive feelings for longer and longer without numbing, sabotaging, or shrinking. It starts small. When something goes well, don't rush past it. Pause, breathe it in. Let your body feel the sensation of ease. When someone compliments you, instead of brushing it off or deflecting, receive it fully. When a relationship feels safe, resist the urge to test it or pull away. Let safety feel normal. These are micro movements, but over time, they rewire your system. Your body begins to understand that good things are not traps. Your mind stops assuming joy is a setup, and your soul begins to trust life again.
And when your nervous system learns that safety can coexist with peace, it stops sending alarm bells every time things go well. This is how expansion becomes sustainable, not through pushing, but through allowing. But here's the part no one talks about. When you begin to hold more joy, more ease, more love, you'll also start grieving. Why? Because your body will finally understand what it never had. You'll feel the absence of ease in your childhood. You'll notice the joy you suppressed to stay small. You'll remember all the times you twisted yourself to fit into spaces that couldn't hold your light. And that grief, it's sacred. It means you're waking up. It means you're expanding beyond survival. You may find yourself crying, not because something is wrong, but because something is finally right. Because safety, once foreign, is now at the door. This grief isn't regression. It's recognition. It's your inner child exhaling. It's your adult self realizing, I don't have to fight for every drop of peace. And when this realization lands, your behavior starts to shift. You stop chasing relationships that feel like emotional puzzles. You stop sabotaging wins with self-doubt. You no longer feel the need to explain your worth or perform for love. You stop confusing effort with value. And you stop equating exhaustion with accomplishment. You begin to trust silence. You begin to welcome stillness. You begin to believe, not just intellectually, but somatically, that good things can stay. And this changes everything. It doesn't mean life becomes perfect. Challenges still come, but they don't destabilize you the same way. You don't immediately spiral. You don't self-destruct. You face life with a new foundation, a regulated nervous system that doesn't see joy as a threat. You can now hold complexity, grief and gratitude, success and humility, love and vulnerability. This is emotional maturity. This is psychological integration. And it's from this space that your real expansion begins. Not the kind that burns you out, not the hustle-driven, prove-your-worth grind, but the soft, steady unfolding of your soul's blueprint. Because once your body believes that safety and joy can coexist, your choices change. You say no more often, not out of fear, but clarity. You say yes more easily, not from obligation, but resonance. You stop waiting for permission to enjoy your life. You stop apologizing for your peace. You stop shrinking your dreams to fit someone else's comfort zone. And the people around you, they start to feel it. Your groundedness, your steadiness, your refusal to abandon yourself. Some will rise with you, some won't. And that too becomes okay. Because now you're no longer afraid of expansion. You no longer see thriving as dangerous. You've rewired the story. You've raised the ceiling. And most importantly, you've remembered who you are beneath the patterns. You are not your fear. You are not your past. You are not the version of you that had to survive. You are the one who chose to grow anyway. Here's the thing about healing. Most people think it looks like light pouring in through cracks, like sudden awakenings, like love returning after pain. But more often than not, healing feels like nothing, like emptiness, like a quiet room where all the noise has stopped, and suddenly, you don't know who you are without it. Because once you stop using suffering as identity, once you stop reaching for validation to patch your wounds, you're left with space. And that space can feel terrifying. When you've lived most of your life chasing approval, trying to earn your right to exist by being good, being useful, being enough, the absence of judgment doesn't bring peace at first. It brings disorientation. You don't know who you are without the mirror of others. You don't know how to rest in yourself. That's why many people unconsciously recreate the dynamics they say they want to escape. They leave toxic environments only to find new versions of them. They outgrow one relationship, but step into another with the same emotional choreography. Not because they're broken, but because their nervous system is still trying to reenact the familiar in hopes of a different ending. It's not that they want pain, it's that pain makes sense. Approval, when you've spent your life chasing it, becomes a currency, a drug, a temporary fix for the deeper ache of not feeling worthy on your own. So when you stop seeking it, when you say, I'm enough, even if no one claps, there's a withdrawal, a psychological unraveling, because the scaffolding holding up your identity begins to collapse. And that collapse, it's sacred. It means you're finally starting to build from truth, not performance. But it also means things get quiet. People may pull away. Your phone might stop lighting up. You may walk into a room and no longer shapeshift to make others comfortable. You stop over-explaining, stop apologizing for your boundaries, stop editing your tone to keep the peace. And the world responds. Some people admire the new you from a distance. Some get uncomfortable. Some leave. And all of that hurts. But it also heals. Because the absence of noise reveals something most people never learn. Your peace was never supposed to be loud. Your power was never meant to beg. Your worth doesn't rise and fall based on who stays or who claps. In this quiet, you begin to feel your real self again. Not the polished one, not the pleasing one, but the raw, tender, still becoming version of you that doesn't need to be filtered. And when that version emerges, everything changes. Not because the world suddenly treats you better, but because you stop measuring yourself by its standards. When that version of you begins to live outside the cage of approval, something subtle yet revolutionary happens. You start making decisions based on truth, not fear. You say yes to what you actually want. You say no without guilt. You leave conversations where you once would have stayed, just to keep things smooth. You stop twisting yourself into shapes that don't fit just to be accepted. And then something even more surprising unfolds. The world doesn't collapse. The people who matter don't leave. They draw closer. The opportunities that align with your soul begin to emerge. Not because you chase them, but because you created space for them to find you. Your relationships deepen, not through drama or proving, but through mutual respect. Your work becomes more meaningful, not because it earns more likes, but because it reflects more of you. And most of all, you feel safe, not because others guarantee it, but because you no longer abandon yourself to earn it. This is the moment when your nervous system, once bracing for judgment or abandonment, begins to relax. It finally learns that being real isn't a liability, it's liberation. But even here, the ego whispers, "Are you sure this is okay? Maybe you should still try to be nicer, more impressive, more agreeable." Those voices don't vanish overnight, but now you hear them with clarity. You recognize them for what they are, echoes of an outdated survival strategy, and you no longer give them the mic, because you've tasted something far more powerful than approval: integrity. Living from integrity doesn't mean you're never afraid. It means you move even with the fear, because self-betrayal is no longer an option. It means your choices reflect your values, not your wounds. It means you don't need applause to know you're aligned. And that alignment, that quiet, steady sense of wholeness, it becomes your compass. You stop looking for signs from the outside world to validate your direction. You trust the map within. And ironically, when you no longer crave approval, you attract more respect, more authenticity, more clarity, because people can sense it. They feel your energy shift from performative to peaceful, from desperate to discerning, from seeking to standing. And in that standing, in that calm rootedness, you offer the world something rare, a human being who is free. Free from chasing, free from pleasing, free from editing their essence to survive. And here's the final truth. You don't become free by being perfect. You become free by being honest, by being brave enough to sit with your discomfort and still choose to be real. Not louder, not tougher, just true. Because truth doesn't beg. Truth doesn't need permission. Truth doesn't perform. It simply is. And once you begin to live from that place, approval becomes irrelevant. Not because you don't care about people, but because you've stopped outsourcing your soul. There comes a point in the journey when you stop trying to fix yourself and start remembering who you were before the world told you what to be. Not the version polished for praise, not the one designed for approval, but the quiet, curious, deeply intuitive version. The one who knew what lit them up before they learned to dim their own spark. This isn't a return to innocence. It's a return to wholeness. Because the truth is, most of us spend years abandoning ourselves just to be chosen. We trade authenticity for attachment. We learn to mirror others so we won't be left behind. We curate versions of ourselves that are digestible, likable, unthreatening, hoping that if we shapeshift well enough, we'll finally be loved. And maybe it works for a while. But then comes the fracture. You wake up in a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels foreign on the inside. You find yourself surrounded by people who like the mask, but not the person underneath. You achieve what you thought you wanted and still feel a hollow ache in your chest. That ache, it's your soul whispering, this isn't it. That's the invitation, not to burn it all down, but to begin the slow, steady process of reunion, of reclaiming the parts you exiled, of making space for the truths you buried beneath performance. It starts quietly. Maybe you speak up in a conversation where you'd usually stay silent. Maybe you say no and let it stand. Maybe you catch yourself mid-performance, mid-people-pleasing, and choose presence instead. These aren't grand gestures, but they're seismic shifts, because every time you choose yourself over approval, you send a message to your nervous system. We're safe here. We belong to ourselves now. And with enough repetition, your internal compass begins to reset. You stop chasing what doesn't feel right. You stop confusing comfort with connection. You stop betraying your gut just to keep the peace. And in that process, something wild and beautiful happens. You become unrecognizable to the version of you who once begged to be seen. Not because you become someone else, but because you've come home. Home to your edges. Home to your fire. Home to the truths that once scared you. And the most powerful part, you no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer perform vulnerability as a strategy for belonging. You embody it. You live from it. And those who can meet you there will feel it, not through your words, but through your groundedness. You don't need to justify why your boundaries have changed. You don't owe anyone a roadmap to your healing. Your growth doesn't require a permission slip. What once felt like a loss, relationships fading, old dreams dissolving, now begins to feel like release. Not because you've hardened, but because you've softened into truth. You're no longer available for what drains you. You're no longer willing to fight for spaces that can't hold your depth. You no longer derive your worth from your productivity, your popularity, or your performance. And in that letting go, you begin to create a life that actually fits. A life built from alignment, not obligation. A life where success is defined by how authentically you can live, not how much you can accumulate. A life where love feels like safety, not strategy. And here's the real gift. You stop seeing healing as a destination. You stop waiting for the moment you're finally complete. Because you realize healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral, a dance, a deepening. There will be days where your old patterns return, moments where you feel fragile. That doesn't mean you're broken, it means you're human. And you're still choosing. Choosing presence over patterns. Choosing connection over protection. Choosing the self you've become over the roles you've outgrown. And that, right there, is the revolution. Because in a world that constantly asks you to betray yourself for belonging, every act of self-loyalty is a rebellion. Every honest no, every unapologetic yes, every boundary drawn not from anger, but clarity. Every pause taken to rest, not because you earned it, but because you exist. These moments build a new foundation, one where your inner world matters more than external metrics, where you no longer chase love that demands your silence, where you no longer edit your aliveness to fit someone else's comfort zone. This is not about becoming a perfect version of yourself. It's about becoming an honest one. And when you live from that place, something remarkable happens. Life stops being a performance and starts becoming a conversation between you and your soul, between your dreams and your daily choices, between who you were and who you're still becoming. You begin to trust your pace. You begin to honor your capacity. You begin to listen, not to the loudest voices around you, but to the still, quiet truth within you. And that truth? It's always been there, waiting, whispering, welcoming you back.